Hello, Room 72. This is Holes Read Aloud Weekend Edition. Yes, it's the weekend, but even on the weekend, a good story is always fun to watch or listen to. I want to give a shout out to Anthony, 92% on extra math. He is doing so great. Jennifer, thank you for logging in also. She's making progress, but I don't see a lot of other people logging in. So if you lost your PIN code, please send me a message and I'll send you another one. It's really important we all get those math facts memorized by the time school gets back in session. Okay, we're back to the story. But first, before I begin, I want to point out my backdrop. This is an original oil painting of who? Ozzy the dog. So my husband took a photo of Ozzy in Death Valley standing on this abandoned school bus. And from that photo, my friend, who's an artist, created this painting. So you can see he's standing on the school bus and it's in Death Valley. You can see the rocks and so on in the background, but she made it colorful. And then of course, Ozzy is so recognizable there, standing there. So yeah, we love this painting and I thought you might enjoy seeing it. Now back to the story. Yesterday, Stanley and Zero were climbing the actual mountain. They discovered weeds, gnats buzzing around their head. They knew that there might be water, but unfortunately Zero passed out and Stanley had to throw him over his shoulder and start carrying up the hill, except he did slip, okay? He did slip, and we're gonna start right there. His feet slipped out from under him. Zero's head knocked against the back of his shoulder as he fell and tumbled into a small, muddy gully. As he lay face down in the muddy ditch, he didn't know if he'd ever get up again. He didn't know if he'd even try. Had he come all this way just to, you need water to make mud. He crawled along the gully in the direction that seemed the muddiest. The ground became gloppier. Gloppy is a word that the author made up, which is perfect. Mud is gloppy. The mud splashed up as he slapped the ground. Using both hands, he dug a hole in the soggy soil. It was too dark to see, but he thought he could feel a tiny pool of water at the bottom of his hole. He stuck his head in the hole and licked the dirt. He dug deeper, and as he did so, more water seemed to fill the hole. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it, first with his fingers, then with his tongue. He dug until he had a hole that was about as deep as his arm was long. There was enough water for him to scoop out with his hands and drop on Zero's face, because Zero's still unconscious. Zero's eyes remained closed, but his tongue poked out between his lips, searching out the droplets. Stanley dragged Zero closer to the hole. He dug, then scooped some more water and let it pour out of his hands into Zero's mouth. As he continued to widen his hole, his hand came across a smooth, round object. It was too smooth and too round to be a rock. Okay, what is this smooth, round object? What could it be? A ball? Unlikely, right? Smooth and round. What do we know might be growing over there that's smooth and round and stinky? Let's see if we find out. He wiped the dirt off of it and realized it was an onion. He bit into it without peeling it. The hot, bitter juice burst into his mouth. He could feel it all the way up to his eyes. And when he swallowed, he felt its warmth move down his throat and into his stomach. He only ate half. He gave the other half to Zero. Here, eat this. What is it? Zero whispered. A hot fudge sundae. Chapter 39. Stanley awoke in a meadow, looking up at the giant rock tower. It was layered and streaked with different shades of red, burnt orange, brown, and tan. It must have been over 100 feet tall. So this giant rock tower is actually the thumb part. They climbed up the mountain and they're looking at this giant rock tower, which is the thumb. Stanley lay a while just looking at it. He didn't have the strength to get up. It felt like the insides of his mouth and throat were coated with sand. And no wonder. When he rolled over, he saw the water hole. It was about 2.5 feet deep and over 3 feet wide. He's good at digging holes, even without a shovel. A shovel would help though, wouldn't it? At the bottom lay no more than 2 inches of very brown water. His hands and fingers were sore from digging, especially under his fingernails. He scooped some dirty water into his mouth, then swished it around, trying to filter it with his teeth. Zero moaned. Stanley started to say something to him, but no words came out of his mouth, and he had to try again. "How you doing?" It hurt to talk. "Not good," Zero said quietly. With great effort, he rolled over, raised himself to his knees, and crawled to the water hole. He lowered his head into it and lapped up some water, like a dog, right? Then he jerked back, clutched his knees to his chest, and rolled to his side. His body shook violently. So he's really sick from that sploosh, right? Bacteria, but he's young and strong. So that's good. Stanley thought about going back down the mountain to look for the shovel so he could make the water hole deeper. Maybe that would give them cleaner water. They could use the jars as drinking glasses. Good thinking. But he didn't think he had the strength to go down, let alone make it back up again, and he didn't know where to look. He struggled to his feet. He was in a field of greenish-white flowers that seemed to extend all the way around Big Thumb. So let's think about plants for a minute. Vegetables, when you grow them, you know that some kind of vegetable is going to grow because it has a flower. Zucchinis have flowers, pumpkins have flowers. All kinds of vegetables that grow in the soil have flowers. Could this greenish field of greenish white flowers be an onion field? Okay, possibly that wasn't the only onion around. And do these onions have magical powers like Sam always said? We'll see. He took a deep breath, then walked the last 50 yards to the giant precipice, that's the thumb, and touched it. "Tag, you're it." Then he walked back to Zero in the water hole. On the way, he picked one of the flowers. It actually wasn't one big flower, he discovered, but instead each flower was really a cluster of tiny little flowers that formed a round ball. He brought it to his mouth, but had to spit it out. He could see part of the trail he had made the night before when he carried Zero up the mountain. If he was going to head back down and look for the shovel, he realized he should do it soon while the trail was fresh. But he didn't want to leave Zero. He was afraid Zero might die while he was gone. Zero was still lying doubled over on his side. "I gotta tell you something," he said with a groan. "Don't talk," said Stanley. "Save your strength." "No, listen," Zero insisted. Then he closed his eyes as his face twisted with pain. "I'm listening," Stanley whispered. "I took your shoes," Zero said. Stanley didn't know what he was talking about. His shoes were on his feet. "That's all right," he said. "Just rest now." "It's all my fault," said Zero. "It's nobody's fault," said Stanley. "I didn't know," Zero said. "That's okay," Stanley said. "Just rest." Zero closed his eyes, but then again he said, "I didn't know about the shoes." "What shoes?" "From the shelter." It took a moment for Stanley to comprehend. "Clyde Livingston's shoes?" "I'm sorry," said Zero. Stanley stared at him. It was impossible. Zero was delirious. Love that word. It means kind of when you have a fever and you're just saying stuff that doesn't make sense. Zero's confession seemed to bring him some relief. The muscles in his face relaxed. As he drifted into sleep, Stanley softly sang him the song that had been in his family for generations. If only the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the tree was just a little bit softer. While the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely, he cries to the moon. If only, if only. Ding, ding, dings. Do I hear dings from anybody out there in my audience? By the way, people, I love comments. I promise to respond to every comment I get today, and I want you to tell who it is, just in case I don't recognize the name, and I want to have a little conversation because I miss you guys, and I want to know how many of you are actually watching my channel. Even if it's just one, I'm still recording, but I want to see you and hear from you. Let me know what you're doing right now. What's going on? Have you taken your dog for a walk? Okay, we're going to read a little bit of chapter 40 here, but I just also wanted to point out, so now Stanley has carried Zero up the mountain. Now he has sang the song that Madame Jeroni wanted the great, great, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing grandfather to sing to her when he took her up the mountain. Interesting. This is many generations, 110 years later. Is it too late to break the curse? Does it have anything to do with the curse? Is it a coincidence? We'll find out. Chapter 40. When Stanley found the onion the night before, he didn't question how it had come to be there. He ate it gratefully. But now, as he sat gazing at Big Thumb and the meadow full of flowers, he couldn't help but wonder about it. If there was one wild onion, there could be more. He intertwined his fingers and tried to rub out the pain. Then he bent down and dug up another flower, this time pulling up the entire plant, including the root. And the root is what? Onions. Now, flashing back 110 years ago. Onions, fresh, hot, sweet onions, Sam called as Mary Lou pulled the cart down Main Street. 8 cents a dozen. It was a beautiful spring morning. The sky was painted pale blue and pink, the same color as the lake and the peach trees along its shore. Mrs. Gladys Tennyson was wearing just her nightgown and robe as she came running down the street after Sam. Mrs. Tennyson was normally a very proper woman who never went out in public without dressing up in fine clothes and a hat. So it was quite surprising to the people of Green Lake to see her running past Sam. "Sam!" she shouted. "Whoa, Mary Lou," said Sam, stopping his mule and cart. "Good morning, Mrs. Tennyson," he said. "How's little Becca doing?" Gladys Tennyson was all smiles. "I think she's going to be all right. The fever broke about an hour ago, thanks to you." "I'm sure the good Lord and Doc Hawthorne deserve most of the credit." "The good Lord, yes," agreed Mrs. Tennyson, "but not Dr. Hawthorne. That quack wanted to put leeches on her stomach. Leeches, my word. He said they would suck out the bad blood. Now you tell me, how would a leech know good blood from bad blood?" "I wouldn't know," said Sam. "It was your onion tonic," said Mrs. Tennyson. "That's what saved her." Other townspeople made their way to the cart. "Good morning, Gladys," said Hattie Parker. "Don't you look lovely this morning?" Several people snickered. Snickered is a kind of a nasty little laugh, like, "Good morning, Hattie," Mrs. Tennyson replied. "Does your husband know you're parading about in your bedclothes?" Hattie asked. There were more snickers. "My husband knows exactly where I am and how I am dressed, thank you," said Mrs. Tennyson. "We have both been up all night and half the morning with Rebecca. She almost died from stomach sickness. It seems she ate some bad meat." Hattie's face flushed. Her husband, Jim Parker, was the butcher. "It made my husband and me sick as well," said Mrs. Tennyson, "but it nearly killed Becca, what with her being so young. Sam saved her life." "It wasn't me," said Sam. "It was the onions." "I'm glad Becca's all right," Hattie said contritely. I keep telling Jim he needs to wash his knives, said Mr. Pike, who owned the general store. Hattie Parker excused herself, then turned and quickly walked away. Now, I just want to give you a little interesting thing. Leeches, look them up on YouTube, Leeches. They suck your blood, and in the old days, people thought it would suck out the poison from your blood, but really it just sucked out your blood and made you even weaker and sicker than you were before. People don't do that anymore, but you might want to look at a YouTube video and check it out. Okay guys, I'm out of time for today. Happy Saturday, and I'll see you tomorrow, Sunday. Love you all. Please leave comments and subscribe. Your teacher, Mrs. Mayorga.